Welcome to House Education, Thursday, February 19. After a long morning with action on the floor and meetings throughout lunch, we are back having committee discussion. Just a few updates not related to the topic at hand. The budget letter, we're probably going to be a little late on. There are a few things sort of behind the scenes I need to get some answers on. And then I just wanted to make sure one of the topics we talked about was the AOE continuing to be the sponsoring agency for the CACFP thing. So that's what I didn't realize that what they also say is not just continue to get sponsored, but to continue to fund it. There's no funding for it in the governor's request.
Didn't realize that was the case.
Yeah, so it was funded last year by appropriations, and then so it was funded in the legislative process last year, but it apparently wasn't in the governor's budget this year.
So just so everyone knows, it's roughly 182,000.
Yeah.
It leverages a bunch of money.
Yeah,
Federal funds. So we don't leverage the federal funds without this, and then the money goes to provide food programs for essentially home child care programs. And if you recall, we had testimony this year or last year, sort of about, I guess it was this year, sort of about how regions are divided, the challenge of not having a sponsor, and all of that. So again, sort of with the caveat, knowing that money is tight, put down that we continue to support its continued funding because not only does it provide a valued service, but it leverages federal dollars as well. Therefore, the payoff is better.
Question, does the Ag Committee weigh in on that one too, or just us?
They have decided, we should have communicated this ahead of time, that if it's an AOE budgeted item, they're going to leave it up to us. But this is an AOE budgeted item.
Sounds good.
I have a chance to say the acronym correctly. Child and Adult Care Food Program.
Child and Adult Care Food Program. And do you have the actual number?
I'm trying to, if I get my computer to pull it up, I believe it's 182, maybe 182.5, but I'm pretty sure it's just 182,000.
Right. If you can just get me the exact number so I can put it in the letter correctly, that would be great.
Absolutely do that.
Anyway, tomorrow's Thursday, right? No. Today's Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. Probably won't have time to get it all to you to review, but I may do that over the weekend, sort of unofficially, but then we'll do more of an official review.
Hunger Free Vermont, 182,000.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so continuing our continued discussions on Act 173, on Act 73, we sort of were leaning toward having a little bit of a debate on the SUSD topic. Representative Doveridge, however, has got some ideas to throw on the table within this topic area, as well as others, I imagine.
Just specifically around SUS. So topic I have is to consolidate Vermont's current ed system into much larger supervisory unions, no supervisory districts, each encompassing multiple larger school districts formed by merging those with similar operating structures. For example, grouping all and merging all non-operating tuition districts, K-6, K-8, and K-12 in their own buckets together. It offers several advantages over shifting to a standalone supervisory district model, preserves the supervisory framework and flexibility while achieving scale, rather than fully dissolving SUs into unified school districts that centralize governance into single entities. This approach also aligns closely with cooperative education service area model from the redistricting task force final report, which prioritizes regional collaboration, voluntary strategic mergers, and shared services over the forced top-down consolidation that districts would have. The core of the proposal is it would scale up SUs by merging like for like within them, to create larger, more efficient regional entities, builds on Vermont's current SU system for shared services while addressing enrollment declines, costs, and equity through targeted voluntary style mergers. And that's after you do all of the bigger mergers, they may decide later to continue to merge other SUs and SDs together. Contrast with the supervisory district model that eliminates layered governance and forces broader, potentially mismatched consolidations. And again, it parallels the task force CISA framework with regional overlays for shared high cost services like special ed, transportation, and purchasing, and incentivized for regional high schools in favoring partnership over prescription. Enhances economies of scale with retained local autonomy, achieves significant cost savings via shared admin, bulk purchasing, unified planning, and resource pooling, preserves local identity and some district level decision making, avoiding the full centralization and rigidity of school district supervisory districts. Balances freedom and unity by keeping community agency and respecting Vermont's local control tradition. It'll address gaps by standardizing quality within like groups, enhanced K-6 programming, shared professional development and specialized staff, and reduce rural and urban disparities, avoids efficiencies from mixing incompatible structures, promoting transparency, accountability, and innovation aligned to grade spans and operations. There's a way to, like, one argument might be is you have geography, distance, topography issues when you have merged like school districts because they're on other sides of an SU. That can be handled through hybrid meetings where participants can join, have in person in their regions, but then join through a remote video, Skype, Zoom, or something like that. So there is still a little bit of a separation there, but you can find ways to make them work together. There'll be stronger buy-in via retained district boards for local input, which counters supervisory districts' disengagement concerns. Ensures equitable access and transparency. And again, it echoes the CISA and the task force successes with the cooperative models. I mean, I can keep going, but I'll just be talking for too long. So I want to stop before I bored everybody.
So clarifying questions.
No.
Let's start off with that. Yes.
Did you mention CTEs?
So they would be based off, I think you'd start like looking at a map, basing them off of CTE so that every one of those SUs have one or more depending on the region and how big you're making them. So absolutely.
And in this idea or this theory, do they become then part of the funding model? The CTEs?
I think I didn't contemplate the funding model because we're still trying to figure that out through the fund, we haven't figured that out through we haven't.
Because that's kind of a missing.
And I don't know that that's something.
Yes, I mean, that's a missing, no matter what path we go.
And that's not something we're going to do here necessarily altogether.
That's a falls into the next year category. So this sounds to me a bit like a mix of the map that Senator Bongartz put on the table last year, which did exactly that, grouped like structures into larger SUs, even if they weren't contiguous, correct? And kind of a combination of the map that he put on the table this year, which basically says all of the colored regions are SUs. But you go a step further and the gray zone, you're making everything
is an SU. Yeah. It's, I thought that would be a way to kind of bridge the gap of all concerns and be able to accommodate all of the needs of the state, not being perfect for everybody, but everybody has a piece they can work with.
So just more clarifying. So for example, in Addison County, rather than a merged SD, it would be a superintendent overseeing 3 existing school district boards that manage their own high schools and K-12 systems.
Well, so I think that when you're looking at merging the internal districts, that we would want to look at, a maximum number, maximum ADM for how big you want that district to be student wise. But, you would have operating and non-operating districts within, and they would depending on how the map was drawn, right? If you have large enough SUs, you're going to have operating and non-operating within each SU. So you would merge so if you have 3 K-12 operating districts, they now become 1. But if that one is got over whatever we might choose for an ADM, because we don't want it to be too big, then it might be 2, right? We might have to make those kind of separations.
So it's really kind of the opposite of Peter's plan.
Of course.
It wasn't my intentional thought, but I like the way you put it.
Yeah. Yes.
So in your thought process, mandatory consolidation within SUs.
Yes,
Like,
And again, regardless of contiguousness.
yes. And I think the biggest concern with that is 2 things I hear is, as you put it in your map, the culture is the same between those 2 that aren't connected because they're so far away from each other. And then how hard is it to come together? Well, educationally, if their districts are similar, let's say a K-6, right, they're already living a similar life when it comes to education, and that's one way they will connect. The other way, and then the meetings, we all do some form of a virtual board meeting these days. I think there's definitely a way to make that all work where everybody can come together.
Represent Long and Representative Hunter.
Just to spit in the dark, because I don't know exactly what you are planning, but I'm gonna give you an example and tell me how it fits. I have this district. I'm gonna, let me put it a different way. I have a town that that has K-6 non-operating. Having 7 and 12. In the K-12 district, but there are only 7-12 in that because it's a modified.
So K-6, there's non-operating, but 7-12 is operating.
Well, 7-12 is operating as part of a modified unit, so it's a K-12 district. They don't just tuition 7-12, they're actually a member of a 7-12 K-12 district because it's modified. It's a what's the MUSD? It's not, why am I drawing blank? Because I live in this world, but I can't remember, but something modified. What's MUSD? No, it's a. It's a modified unified union, MUUSD, it's a modified unified union school district. So there's 7-12 in that modified K-12. It's a K-12 district, but it's a modified unified union school district. So not all the towns in that modified district operate the same. They're only there for the.
I'm going to try.
I'm just saying how complicated this is.
But I'm trying to understand because actually I don't know this. So you're saying that in this MUUSD, there's, I'm gonna just.
What is the question?
I'm trying to see how it fits into where will it fit? He's talking about different SU. So I'm trying to see how an example of just one example that I know of. And I'm trying to figure out, I can get it if you're even if they're not contiguous, the non-operatings. But some towns do 2 different things. How do you fit those?
I think for the probably very rare case in the state that happens, the couple places that might be, there would be a conversation about which route they would prefer to take, right? Because if they're a town, if you have 4 towns and 2 of them designate and 2 of them don't, I'm assuming that's kind of what you're talking about. They're within the same.
One's full choice and one is no choice.
The one that's no choice goes into a district that has what they have, and the one that's full choice is a
So the town
non-operating.
would be, their children would.
Oh, so the
split
town
into
is
2
split.
different- I'm saying the
Oh.
town.
That's a
Can I
little
try
further
to
down the
answer,
road.
tell me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong? I think that if you don't have somebody like to pair up with, then you remain your own school district as it is today.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that what you're
if
saying?
there was one non-operating and everybody else was operating, they would be their own district.
So
Within
that
the SU.
Yes. it is.
would remain. Well, because they're two separate districts. One town is two separate districts. They're their own district and the part of another district. That's one.
Under this, unless we made some changes, because then it would remain as it is. And it would be its own.
So then the K-12 district that they were a part of would remain the same as they are too, because they're part of it. It's just complicated.
It is, yeah.
Well, it's all
I just- how it
complicated.
all
I mean,
fits
even
in.
the map that
But
Peter gave.
you also can't be looking at it as within the confines of the SUs how they are now,
Right.
right?
Uh,
The
You're
SUs,
talking about
right,
this.
the SU,
You're talking about school district.
correct, but you're talking about within the SU. So that the SU that you're defining might not be the SU of what this is
Right, if you
looking at.
create-
It could be a bigger
I totally see
SU
that part.
with other operating districts, and it wouldn't be exactly what you're speaking of.
My question is totally unrelated to SU. It's simply related to school district. It doesn't matter what SU they're in.
You're not talking about the merger of the districts under the SU?
No, I'm talking about a school district. Actually, I'm talking about two school districts.
I think she's asking, how would that work under a merger?
Correct. It doesn't matter what the SU is.
And I'm only, rather than getting into real specific examples, I think overall what you're saying is that if you don't have somebody in a like governance structure to merge with, within that SU, you don't merge. You're
Right.
just, you are a school district on your own,
And as I had mentioned earlier,
under the SU.
correct, and as I mentioned earlier, like it does leave room for those voluntary mergers. So this might be one of those places where within that SU, the towns and everybody decides that we need to make this change to fit the structure properly, and they decide to go either all operating or all non-operating. That might be a decision they make at the local level. That's part of keeping it under the SU. They get to make those decisions while still creating more scale through these consolidations.
So all consolidations, well, not all. Yeah. So, I think it would be good if people feel comfortable to broaden this out to more of the SUSD conversation, because I think what Josh has put on the table here is, frankly, one direction to go. Instead of breaking us up into larger school districts, break us all up into SUs. Keep the current structure sort of under the SU, merge where possible like-minded or like structured districts. But it does, as opposed to sort of one governance model in my plan that are strictly school districts. I mean, I kind of guessed the philosophy here. I think for me, the challenge will always be an SU, like merging Addison County into one SU doesn't really move the needle at all. You might get rid of a couple of superintendents, but you still have all of the complexity. In fact, you go from having no complexity to a new level of complexity, because it never was an SU, as opposed to going to a less complex model like the SDs.
And that's where I think like it plays really well in that CISA model, right? Not in the same realm, but like parallel to it, because then it creates the SU, which has all those shared services. So you're also bringing that into us, which doesn't currently have right now. And you're able to consolidate those services, bring down costs there. And the districts that are there do get bigger, but they're already living the district life.
So I would push back against comparing it to the CISA model. Yes, broadly on the idea of scale, but you got to remember that each district within an SU is its own municipality, governing body, everything that sort of is a district. So they don't have to buy into any shared service. They might say, in they are under no obligation, or they can actually object to it as a member of the SU board, whatever shared service they might be trying to regionalize, because they are their own sort of autonomous entity as a district.
I understand that, but I mean, all reality though, I would, I think we have to think higher of everybody. They're going to want to try and keep costs down. I mean, they're going to want to try and share these services. They're going to work together to share service they can all agree upon.
Last thing is that having watched many a cooperative agreement fail because, oh yeah, we need it. And then 2 years later, no, we don't anymore because the family moved out of town. It could be something as simple as that, and then these fall apart. But that's, in terms of it being, the same as a CISA, I would say that's not necessarily what I would call it. From a broad level, the idea is building scale and all of that, having one entity try to coordinate it, yes. Yeah. Beth?
I think Rob was next.
Go ahead, Rob, I'm sorry.
This is like Beth would say, this is a policy choice as we write the policy about like CSAs.
What's the question?
Well, as far as, I was just trying to piggyback on what you guys were saying, as far as like shared services within an SU.
So you're saying right into policy that they have to share
That's
services.
why the SU is basically sharing.
Yes.
That's what
That is what it is.
Go ahead.
So just a reminder on a school district is a municipality, but a supervisory district isn't.
No, a supervisory district is a municipality.
It is.
It
It's a
is?
supervisory-
Yeah, it
Because it's a supervisory union, and a supervisory union is not a municipality.
Well, we're getting back into.
So
we're
on
getting
your
back-
map, were they all school
Not for
districts, or were they supervisory districts with school districts within them? Just remind.
In my world of language,
Yeah.
I'll say is another benefit of what I'm proposing is that everything is a school district.
Right, it's a school district.
But I think I just want to be very clear, a school district and a supervisory district are essentially the same thing, and they are both municipalities that have taxing authority.
True. I know a school district does.
Right, but so.
It is a school, they are school districts on your,
As we heard yesterday, a school district
one thing.
is a supervisory district if it has the, a school district, anything, let me put it this way, anything with an elected board that is overseeing a school or group of schools is a municipality with taxing authority. Whether you call it a supervisory district or a school district, it doesn't matter. So,
I know school
so,
districts are municipalities, but supervisory unions are not, so.
yes, but we,
Talking about
but we use,
districts.
but we use the overall in the BOCES language we look at,
Yes,
so that we don't have to write every
agreed.
type, we just say supervisory.
But in your map, each unit is a school district.
Absolutely.
And again,
Unto itself.
supervisory unions written into our statute.
That's what I thought. It's clarifying.
That's another reason like keeping in tune with that statewide.
Yeah, I think that we could get lots of testimony about the challenges of supervisory unions. So here's my other concerns. You've all heard my concerns with supervisory unions. I also worry about the future of leadership in our state. I do not believe that a supervisory union position is nearly as attractive to a up and coming educational leader as a supervisory district or a school district, just because of the number of boards, the complexity of governmentship, one could argue, undemocratic nature of a supervisory union. Period. I'm going to have somebody else talk. Kate, go ahead.
I would just piggyback on that. I first started writing a bunch of things that sounded pretty negative, so I'm trying to turn it around. My superintendent is our district's educational leader. And there is no way on earth I would want to share him with other districts. He can be everybody's educational leader in a bigger district, but he can't go to school board meetings over here and school board meetings over there and school board meetings over there. We're not going back. We already did that. We had 7 different boards governing 5 different towns that all fed into U32. We're not going back. What we've heard, we waste a lot of time on this committee, a lot of time. What we've heard from superintendents is that they support SDs. What many of us know as educators is that SDs are better for educators. And the research says, as Erin said the other day, that if you're going to consolidate, you get money with SDs. You don't get it from SDs.
Yes.
The only pushback is what superintendents want. I don't talk to all of them, but I've talked to a handful as well, and they talk about liking the SU model and wanting the SU model.
When I talk about superintendents, I'm talking about the Vermont Superintendents
You're
Association.
talking about those who work under them, right, who are on the ground in these
Ultimately, though,
towns.
it'll be, you know,
Our decision.
yes.
Not unanimous in there.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to say, is they're not unanimous in that same belief, so I think it's, well, the association may feel that way, I'd say it's probably a little different on the ground.
I think one of the fundamental questions here I would have, Josh, is why propose a model that I would say we know is more expensive just because of the bookkeeping complexities of maintaining 3 to 20, depending on how it's all set up, independent districts, each with their own set of books, each with their own labor contracts, each with their own on and on.
I mean, I think you can find your way to scale to make it extremely more cost effective for the state while respecting the autonomy that the state has, that each area has tried to keep for all these years. It condenses it quite a bit more. But again, as I said, it's bridging that gap between the two different sides of the conversation. And I think that's what our constituents are asking us for to do, is to try and find a way forward that really addresses what all Vermonters need, which I agree, we need to bring the cost down. I also agree that, you know, towns should be able to, or districts and areas of the state should be able to live in the way they choose. So how do you bridge both gaps? And this is a way to do so.
Did you bring up the fundamental question of if we continue to sort of do the same thing, or I would like to say, take a step backwards and expect a different result? I don't think that's
This is
necessarily the way to go.
It is different.
Yes, as I said, it is perhaps a step backward from progress we've already made towards newer, bigger, larger districts.
There might be a sweet spot. I was also investigating like a total SU model. But in one model, I wish Kate were here, talked about, you know, in a large SU with 7 different boards, like local boards, the superintendent no longer travels board to board, but rather is in charge of the SU board, where each one of those members sends a representative. And it's really, he or she is dealing with the SU board and overall management of the SU, rather than like every night going off to a board.
I'm not sure, I would be uncomfortable legislating how a superintendent chooses to respond to the needs of his own supervisory union.
They're responsible. They have a responsibility, though, so they have to
And
decide.
having been on a supervisory union system, I can tell you, we were the high school within that supervisory system, the middle school, high school that I was the chair of the board of, we wanted superintendent at that meeting because we were 50% of the budget. All right, Chris, bring it home.
No, I don't have a lot to add. I thank you for bringing this up because I think these are the conversations that we need to have in order to really fine tune what we're looking for here. So we got to be able to look at all sides of this and do our best to find some sort of compromise that's going to work for the state.
Yeah, and I absolutely would like to thank you for putting this discussion on the table because we need to have it about SUs versus SDs. Sure, got anywhere, but I think airing it is very important. And I'll be honest, I get the concept that if we're gonna go with SUs, let's go all in. But I still can't get beyond the concept of why would we pick a less efficient, more expensive system when our goal here is to make a more cost-effective structure that is more nimble, more responsive to the changing demographics of our state.
And I mean, like when Rural was here the other day, they were talking about how they were able to show that the costs weren't they weren't more expensive. So
Yeah, I would just, as I said to them, cost and spending are two different things. How much you choose to spend on education versus how much education costs are tightly related. But I would say, is there a correlation between SUs and choosing to spend less money on education? Maybe, I don't know. But I don't want to get that, make it sound like it's perhaps more cost effective. I think a district can be cost effective as well by spending less. And we can probably find many districts that are also down there. I want to hear.
If you can't make the correlation on one, you really can't make the correlation on the other.
I can disagree with that. Representative Brady?
I am not entirely sure without like some others such as JF of expertise in the room that were really equipped to talk about cost and truly understand, because things like the weights, and what we are weighting and where, we are weighting non-operating districts, we are weighting tuition and things that dramatically skew what people think they are spending versus their tax rates. And I think that's a far more complex conversation that requires that, quite frankly, I want us to be having, and maybe we just need to be with ways and means at all times, but I think we need JFO or, financial experts in the room to fact check us on some of those understandings.
I appreciate that. My pushback was because we're saying one's more expensive than the other, and we really, right, I hear both sides of the conversation, so data would be great to see what both look like.
Well, I had made the point often in the work I did through the fall is it's difficult to paint them all with the same brush because there's a lot of variance in an SD to an SD, more so with an SU to an SU. The SU I worked in had 2 school districts in it, one for all of the elementary, one for the high school. The supervisory union north of me has 15 school districts in it. So, part of why we really looked at that compromise of, okay, you're a supervisory union, but everybody that operates the same way within that supervisory union gets together and becomes a school. Because supervisory unions are very different from place to place to place. They're not all the same size. They don't all have the same number of students, same number of school districts. So just the term alone doesn't tell you enough about how efficient it is or how expensive it is.
Ready to
I
vote?
was gonna say, at the same time, like, oh, should we straw poll SUs versus SDs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we will. All right. Further conversation here? I think we are all feeling a little set in our ways. Not surprisingly, I'm a little set in my way because that's what I put on the table. I think that there has been questions whether there's some sort of hybrid here in terms of governance, but yet I've yet to sort of have anybody say I've got the genius solution here.
Working on it.
But, right, and I just want to say, so TBD. As we try to move forward here, I'm not sure we do need to have these conversations. We do need to discuss the pros and cons of SUs and SDs. Do people feel, let me test this, is there more you feel you need to learn from testimony that we could bring in here regarding the SD-SU debate, which we have had lots and lots of testimony on, over the 2 years now that we've been here. But some updated hearing or thinking, I would entertain suggestions.
Possibly, can I get the afternoon to ponder that?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah. There's no deadline on that.
Big time.
Yeah, Evelyn.
This isn't an exact answer to your question, but it is something that I'm sitting here listening to all of this and contributing my tiny little way. That it seems that we keep coming back to, you just said something that reminded me of it, and you did, and Representative Brady did, where we can't really compare apples to apples. We don't really know. That's an assumption we make. It's costs, drivers, costs, spending versus cost. It sort of feels to me like it's a lack of data in many cases for us to be able to actually compare. And I'm not trying to suggest who should sit in that chair and give us data, but I think that we need to start thinking about what data will back up what our proposals are.
Yeah.
What data do we have to back up the proposals? Because I wasn't, when I mentioned that small district that I was trying to tell you, Representative Dogovich, I was literally not, I was only saying it because of it being one piece of a bigger puzzle, and it's the complexity and the lack of data to back us up to be able to promote something. I mean, sometimes it's financial data, sometimes it's not, And so that's all. I just feel like there's more of a need for more data in some of these cases for sure. I prefer to operate with data in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, like I could sit here and talk about SUs versus SDs all day, but all I would be doing is repeating what we've already heard. I'm not gonna put you through that.
What we've all said the whole time.
What's that?
What we've all said the whole time.
Yeah.
Not just.
I mean, I could go. Okay, so could we then, well, let me just throw it open to the floor. Thoughts, ideas, suggestions for the next time we're talking. We're going to continue this conversation, but we might shift it a little bit.
On this particular topic, I think those of us sit and think who we may, if we have anyone else to talk about it.
But I would say also if there are off the SUSD train, if there are other areas that people would like to explore further, we can. Again, I don't want to short the committee on a testimony because we have plenty of available space to have somebody sit in that chair. So thoughts on that, please let me know. We're going to be too short next week. So I just want to make sure that everybody's got the opportunity to get what they need between now and the end of the week. Great. All right, let's go back to CSAS a moment. A little bit of time we have here. And by the way, given the fact that we probably are going to talk ourselves out well before floor, I did try to move up our vote on H 542. I'd really like to have Ledge Council be in the room for the vote, not available till 4:15.
4:15,
Yeah, but it's a 15-minute vote, so.
usually leave at 2:30, but let's hang around.
Not supposed to say that out loud.
The floor is.
My night's with your dad, so. My family commitment tonight.
Can't be.
I rescheduled it, so
3:30.
they're not available.
The general practice is to make sure you have legislative counsel in the room. And legislative counsel is not available.
4:15 for the vote.
Well, after the floor.
Oh, okay. Roughly 4:15.
4:15. Okay, all right, so listen. Let's pretend everything has been settled in terms of districts, SUs, maps. everything else. There is nothing in Act 73 that talks about CISAs. So let's just talk about them independently and on their own. What would people envision is the path forward with them? In a world of 50 to 30 districts or SUs in the state, the questions that we have brought up time and time again are, well, we've got the law that we have that spells some of this out in terms of governance, but not terribly specifically. But again, we got mandatory versus not mandatory, state funded, not state funded. Do we want to do anything to make them happen if they're voluntary? So talk among yourselves. Yeah, if this is a priority for us and we want to move it forward, what do people think it should look like? And this is kind of a fun one because we're not set in our ways. Well,
Everyone.
You go first.
And can we talk a little bit more about the mandatory or voluntary? Like yesterday,
Yeah, whatever.
I was right off the bat mandatory, but there was some very good dialogue in here. So like right now, I'm more on the fence about mandatory and voluntary. I want to know how, if it's voluntary, we obviously want to get the best return on investment for having a CISA. Right, so that means everybody should be involved in that CISA and utilizing it. How do we, if it's voluntary, how do we guarantee that?
Talking of CISAs.
Talking, yeah. So that's, I mean, I'm really on the fence now about the mandatory or voluntary.
Actually, my question might help with that, because one of the questions I have about it, I mean, it's a really good question, and one of the questions I have about it is, state, you mentioned state funded or locally funded. If it were state funded, and just I'm literally talking off the top of my head here, if it were state funded, isn't that, if you're not, if it's voluntary and it's state funded, you're kind of losing out if you're not on that.
Yeah, and I guess when I said
I
state
guess I'm
funded,
looking at it as incentive, that's all.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
looking at it for incentives to answer what.
Right. Yeah, and I wasn't thinking 100% state funded. I was thinking more like, do we want to throw $50,000 that?
We have a 10 now, I mean, if we put, more into it, something like that to help get them function. Yeah. So that's sort of what
I would say that the people who pay attention to what we're doing in here are probably listening. And maybe this is something where get a little guidance, because I'm not sure they have even had the opportunity to sort of think about what's the best way to go about this. I'm with Chris, I'm back and forth all the time. I tend to think voluntary with incentives, but I think you need somebody to make it happen. Like a state person who's going to go around and bring people together. Yes, Kate.
I am definitely leaning voluntary. And I also think that the state funding should be there in as much as it was for the one that asked for money and we were able to give it to them. So whatever that amount was, we make sure that that amount is available to each one that opens up. And if we could do something, and Beth always says we can do anything, something over a timeline where it's voluntary at the beginning and allow those with capacity to kind of get them set up, then maybe the areas where they're already doing everything they can because they've got PCBs in their building or whatever else is going on, or they're so small or they're so rural or whatever that they can't be a part of that, then they don't need to be yet. And then as the bill progresses or the years pass, then everybody needs to have joined one. And by then they'll be all set up by those who have the capacity to do that work.
And once they see success, they may be very willing to move
Or
forward.
once they need a paper, something, once they need a service that they see is available.
So in the spirit of your hybrid request earlier, throwing out something else. Maybe there's like, if we move down the road of CSAs, is there a way to try and incentivize it as much as possible, but then also look at where, as they start to proliferate around the state, we see the successes, and if we have areas of the state that are not involved in CSAs and their expenditures in these specific areas that are handled better under these CSAs can be, they're high, so we can mitigate them by doing that. Is there a cudgel to force them to have to join it? Like if you can't reel it in on your own, we've given you these opportunities, these incentives to go, you haven't taken advantage of it. Your costs are high, you're not doing anything to reel it in, so now you have to join these CSAs.
You know, so it sounds quite similar to what Kate was just saying, that started off voluntary, and then maybe go to a forced down the road. I think that the answer is yes, as we do whatever we want. Again, sitting here and coming up with a metric that you use to say you now have to join, I think would be really challenging.
Maybe
As opposed to just time passing.
and that could be right, a thing that there's a look back at a certain point to see what success is and how things are, and then maybe that's when the legislature puts that.
I mean, I personally, you know, sort of defaulting to common sense, I would hope that if they're successful, people would be knocking the door down to want to join. I can't imagine why they wouldn't.
Run it through now.
So as we sort of put this together, would somebody like to take the position of mandatory?
If it was mandatory CISAs versus mandatory district mergers, I feel like I could get on board with that choice.
And we are leaving the big modern discussion aside.
No, I know that, I know, but I'm saying like if that didn't have, if we could save money by mandatory CISA mergers and never go back to talking about mandatory districts, then that's something I can get behind. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And in the reverse world, would you say voluntary? And we had a discussion the other day as we were talking about this, about like what should come first. That was a valuable discussion as well.
What do you think, Ian? Would you lean voluntary if it was the other way? If there were first forced mergers? I don't know what else if there's forced mergers. I'm not ready to answer the second part of that
Yeah.
question.
So I guess I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and maybe we need more testimony, but we're all on the same page about how this structure works. I don't mean governance, I'm thinking more of funding and then the structure under the funding. So I'm going to pose this and let everybody think about that. There's a grant that is given to each CISA when they form. And the CISA, this may be what we have in place right now, but again, I'm not on that board, so I wouldn't know the details beyond. Then there is a fee to become a member that is based on, let's just say, number of size of district, student count, whatever. And then, so now you're a dues paying member of a CISA, and you've signed the memorandum of agreement to do it. And then that's your annual cost. Everybody pays in, and that pays for probably some leadership to keep the CISA organized, executive director, for example. And then once it's up and running, each district who's become a member chooses how they want to use it. And they may spend a lot of money through a CISA, or they may spend very little or none in any given year, because the needs in our districts are whatever their districts look like. I'm not trying to suggest that district size, but so they're kind of self-funding at that point. And the more use of them, the more powerful and big they get.
The more revenue they take in.
Exactly. And so, and the more, frankly, if the more revenue they take in, the more they need to provide services, and that may include shared staffing and, all the multiple professional developments and everything. It feels to me like that's a model that feels really positive for outcomes to me. And if you were a district within a CISA that, I guess I'm not having as hard a time, not suggesting, I'm not raising my hand under the mandatory, but it feels like the mandatory buy-in makes some sense to me, as long as you get to choose how much you use it once that is set up. I mean, an organizational foundation, which is what the buy-in would be, it's critical to any startup like that, right? Everybody has the opportunity to use it how they want. So I'm not saying I'm not hung up.
I get what you're saying is that
But I want to make sure,
mandatory may be necessary in order to get that initial buy-in.
unless we're gonna really straight fund it, and I don't see, I think the startup thing is a really important part of state support, and I frankly would love to see more than 10 grand, especially if they're, I also.
The 10 grand was strictly to help them write articles of agreement.
Exactly. So, but I also see the value of these have got to be, especially in more rural areas, pretty large. Like the one that's already in place. Yeah. To actually be functioning in a way. Some of them will need to be, some won't because of numbers of population, but that's.
Go back to something that Rep. Brady often mentions. I don't think the foundation formula considers CISA dues. And the expense the district will have to pay to belong to a CISA and use a CISA. So everything intersects with how we're deciding to fund it. Just saying.
The foundation formula does take into account the services, and if you're paying for those services by
Correct.
using that fund to pay for a CISA, but anyways, yeah, that just, but, and
What you're saying is money is fungible.
as I continue this argument in my head about mandatory and then voluntary, I want to go back to, we take a lot, we talk about the districting task force a lot. They recommended mandatory. Now I know it's slightly out of context because they were saying mandatory without, not a conjunction of a consolidated district now, but their recommendation was mandatory, and I wonder what their recommendation would be with a map included. I don't think we'll get that answer, but. Stop.
I won't help any of us any here, but to connect those, I think exactly, what you're saying about what's included in the foundation formula. I think without much clearer work, I'm not comfortable saying I know what services are included in the foundation formula and to what extent, because transportation has not been, when we think of the sort of high frequency items that come up as things that CISA can do, transportation is one that is currently not been figured out whatsoever that we've been made aware of. Special education is probably the largest bucket of remaining work on the foundation formula, and that's another high frequency use of CSAs. I do not know how professional development is accounted for in the foundation formula, so that would be a question. Maybe it is, I'm not sure if it is, but that's another high frequency. And then the sort of purchasing, kind of raw materials and tech side of things. Again, I don't know what the assumptions are in the foundation formula. I'm not aware of it being on the sort of short list of like 10 to 15 pretty big things that haven't been worked out in the foundation formula. But I'm not comfortable of assuming all those services have been accounted for in the foundation formula as it exists presently.
And I wasn't assuming
Well,
that
yeah.
was-
No,
Sorry.
I think it is fair to say, a school district gets a lump sum of money based on the profile of each and every student under a foundation formula.
Yeah.
How they choose to spend that money ultimately is up to the school district. I would imagine they would not be willing to invest in a CISA unless they were getting a significant return on investment, so that the money they're getting in the foundation formula could go even further.
Even like the fees, right? If you're saving that much money, fees just
there's no need to contemplate a fee in it because odds are that fee is significantly less than the money you're saving if you're gonna do it.
The opposite also
Theory.
happened. Just saying.
Yeah.
You know,
You
it
could-
could possibly be that you can't keep the CISA going because you don't have enough money. Through the foundation.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you were describing the model, however, it does almost seem like you sort of invest in it to get it set up. And then as you move to a fee for service, it becomes self-funded.
Yes, that was.
But nobody's gonna buy those
Concept of it.
services.
But now we're talking about it under foundation formula, and I wasn't actually, I was just saying it about organizational.
Yeah,
And so, you know, it literally could be the other way. School districts were finding out that however the foundation formula ends up working isn't funding it enough. It could actually, you could be buying into a forced merger of a CISA and not be able to take advantage of the services they provide. You know, it's, I just want to make sure that we're aware it could go both ways. Shouldn't, but it could.
if I were to sum up the vibe, that the vibe is lean, voluntary, not hardcore voluntary. But needing a boost. Whether that be it should probably be in the form of two things: money, incentive grants to create them. And we probably should, if we're gonna go that route, say a CISA isn't a CISA unless it's got, 3 school districts in it or 4 school districts in it. Right now, we just have any 2. Or some entity funded to go out, if it's voluntary, to go out and actually make it happen. Because as we know, school boards and superintendents are very busy, and they don't have somebody sort of bringing them together to talk about this. They're not going to get together and talk about it because they're busy. Yes.
If our CISAs have 3 or 4 school districts in them, but we're not supposed to have more than 7 CISAs.
We would need to readjust our expectations.
Okay.
And that's gonna, that will require some thought, because I think, while 5 to 7 was somewhat arbitrary, it was also based on testimony that said you need scale for a CISA.
Right. So I guess my question is, would we readjust our expectations on more CISAs, or would we readjust our expectations on larger school districts? Because that has a lot to do with my thinking.
If we were to go with the draft map that I put on the table, we are still at 27 school districts. So it seemed to me that it would require a significant number of school districts to form a CISA.
But not necessarily to get it started.
Right.
Remember, if it's voluntary, the ones who have capacity could get it started.
Yes.
And then the ones who don't maybe could join later.
Yes.
So I don't want to put too much pressure on that number.
Right. Right, but do you sort of say any 2 that want to get together and form a CISA, they get $50,000 to get started? Or do you want to say, if you want that level of incentive, there's got to be, yeah, something like that. The floor is open for further conversation on anything sort of within this topic realm. So as we are not going outside what's listed on our agenda.
Let's just sign out. We'll see. You're getting pretty good at summarizing this. Note it.
We are voluntary curious.
Questions?
You've had some very good wording lately that I really want to remember. and put on. I was trying to think of one, yes, I couldn't remember.
Either.
I'd love to know what they were, because I certainly.
Yeah, yesterday was a good one.
All right, well, I guess we will pause here.
Peterisms. I get a book, The Peters.
You can pause here. Yeah, I apologize. I think we do need to come back to vote. Well, let me just ask this. How much of it, I mean, there is no deadline to vote on this bill. So I don't want to highly inconvenience people who may have
I-
obligations that are rather pressing.
My schedule has changed tonight.
Back here after the floor.
Just yank it, change.
And we'll,
Or goes to 5 o'clock, in which case, no.
let's call that right now. If the floor goes beyond 4:15, 4:30, we will not come back.
It shouldn't, but you never know.
Oh, my God.
Good. So, we'll adjourn here, floor at 3:30, back here at,